Well, good evening and welcome to the Proactive Caring School and Home Exchange. We're so glad you're able to meet with us tonight or view this. I think you're going to find it of extreme importance and very, very interesting. On behalf of myself and Elaine Sproat and Lisa Nathan and Peggy Pisano, we welcome you to this. And we have two very familiar guests. And why we say that is because they joined us twice in the last season. And then they took their concept and created it based upon a book that they've published called Thinking It Through, and created a guidebook for parents, embedding their problem-solving model. Now, in this part of our program, again, we would not be here if it wasn't for DDPC, New York State Development Disability Planning Council. Myself and Jeff Kahana, we run a Center on Aging and Disability Policy at the College of Mount St. Mary. And the New York State DDPC, Kim Berg and company have just been unbelievable supportive colleagues. And as a result of that, we're back now focusing on transition. So tonight we have joining us will be Dr. Patricia Cyganovich and Dr. Michael Hibbard. Dr. Cyganovich retired after 30 years as a principal in the North Salem Middle School High School in North Salem Central School District. And Dr. Michael Hibbard was the assistant superintendent for instruction. They have years and years of practical embedded experience that they have now taken into the arena of consulting and as authors. They spoke, as I indicated, during a school exchange about how to bring mindfulness to problem solving. Together, as I indicated, they published a book, Mindful Approaches, Thinking It Through, a parent guide to mindful approach for problem solving. And tonight, they're going to continue to build upon that theme about using the model that they've created, which is so useful in the area of transitions. So with that, I'd like to welcome Dr. Hibbard and Dr. Cyganovich. And what the format will be is that they will present, and then Peggy Pisano as school psychologist and Lisa Nathan as parent advocate and meditator will have a response to it. And then Lisa will always embed in her presentation her signature. And her signature is a practice of the meditative based approach, which she has used and built into a part of an essential part of her life. So with that, welcome Dr. Hibbard and Dr. Cyganovich.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm hoping I'm sharing a screen. Yes.
Yes. Look.
Yes.
Yes.
Life is good. There you go. Well, thank you very much. That's my biggest stress moment right there. Is it going to work? Anyway, so thank you for having us, Dr. Force. We're very excited, Mike and I, to be here. Many of you have been participating over the last couple of weeks with the School and Home Transition Exchange. And you've been learning how to prepare yourselves and your youngsters for the social and emotional upheavals that come with life's transitions. And while transitions are not all bad, I mean, think about graduations coming up this month and all the kinds of exciting things that do happen in life, marriage, buying a house, getting a job. We experience them often. And for many of us, navigating the change which a transition brings can be challenging, to say the least. In fact, Bruce Feiler in 2020 explained that life is in the transition in a book by that same name, and that we spend half our lives in this unsettled state. That's a lot of stress, a lot of worry, a lot of uncertainty that we face every day, and makes things a little bit difficult. Life is hard, but so very beautiful. This is a mindful approach that we have been happy to share with you and with Dr. Force and the work that they've been doing over the last 2 years. We call it the cycle of problem solving. And it's a way to help get through that hard part of life till you can get to the part that's beautiful. But what's a problem? And what are common problems that you face during transitions? Well, take a look at this list. Take a minute to read it. And do you notice anything about the synonyms for solving a problem? Accomplishing a goal, meeting a challenge, overcoming an obstacle, find a better way, dealing with a difficulty. Any common theme there that you see? I know it's terrible when people want you to answer their questions, so I'll just answer it for you. The idea here is that they've got a positive spin to them. Solving a problem, though we usually think of it in a negative way, doesn't have to be. In fact, it can be one of the most meaningful life experiences. It sometimes is difficult and we have to deal with it, but sometimes it's the accomplishment of a goal, of something we really want to do as an individual or as a family. And we need to have an approach to do that. It's true that we can get to beautiful places, but sometimes the journey is pretty hard. What we're advocating for today and the work that we did previously is a roadmap for that difficult road. The cycle of problem solving provides you and your youngster with a way to address the bumps on those difficult roads, especially when the transitions hit, and then the bumps can be certainly difficult.
So some of the transitions that we can think about are, what am I going to do this summer? How can I improve my grades next year? How can I make new friends? How can I find a job? What shall I do after high school? And how can I find someone to help me? So those are transitions, and you notice it's what and how transitions. And all of these, as you become aware of them, create frustrations, anxieties. And we'll move on to 7. So a situation happens, you become mindful of wanting to get a job or you needing to have new friends, and so you feel frustration. And so this amount of frustration builds, and then it builds more, and then more that you're kind of out of control with it, and that frustration might turn into anger because you just don't know what to do, and you're just so angry about it. Or it might turn into withdrawal and depression because you just are overwhelmed and you feel insignificant and out of control, and that's sometimes dangerous to do. So what we're saying is that there's a way of taking control of the situation. We're going to present a model, a framework, a roadmap we call the mindful proactive cycle of problem solving. And so it's once you become mindful of a frustration and you can gain a little calmness through your skills of meditation and breathing, that's not enough. You need a process to actually take control of the situation. And so that's what we're going to do today, is to talk about a process. And the person can feel in control, they can feel confident, and they can feel like it's possible, I can move forward. So we're going to the next one. And so this is the cycle of problem solving. And notice as you look at this graphic, you'll see that it's a gear, and the reason that it's a gear will be evident a little bit later. The driving force of this gear is creative and critical thinking, the way they interact. And there are some phases, 6 phases, and there's a process here. So we're going to talk about that. Now, you might think about this graphic and these labels for what the processes, each of the 6 processes or phases are, as like a little cheat sheet. If you had this and you can refer to it and feel like you can have a process to take control of thinking through what's going on and coming up with some kind of a satisfactory solution. And so moving on to the next slide. There's a 6-phase process, and phase 1 is finding and analyzing the audience. So when a situation happens and you need to stop, calm down and say, so what's the problem here? What's the problem? What is it? How can I state it in words? How can I write it in a sentence? How can I describe it to somebody? Who's relevant to this problem? Is it just me? Is it my parents? Is it my teacher? Is it my boss? You know, who is connected to wanting to know something about the solution of the problem? So that's the first phase. The second phase is research. What do I need to know? What do I need to know? What do I know already? What do I need to know? Where can I find it? How can I get information so that I'm more thoughtful about what's happening? And the degree to which I can become thoughtful helps me to go to phase 3, which is generating solutions. So in this phase, we want to have a lot of ideas, many ideas, not just one, like one comes to mind and let's just do it. No, this is the place where you stop, you brainstorm, you get encouraged to think of 5 ideas. How about one more? How about one more? You write a lot of ideas, no editing. Crazy ideas are fine. Just write them all down, talk them all out, and get them, get a list of them. And then the next step is to say, okay, out of this collection of ideas, what looks like it might work? What do I want to try first? And so you maybe have some criteria and you make a decision of, okay, this is what I'm going to try first. And how will I go about it? What am I going to do to actually implement this solution that I have selected? And then the next step is do it. Okay, do it, communicate it to the audience, carry it out, keep working at it. And then after you do that, after you try to implement it, and then you can see to the degree to which it worked, then you come to the last step, which is so crucial to say, so how'd I do? What is it that worked? What am I good at? As I think about what I've done in this whole, the previous 5 phases of this, what am I good at? What can I get better at? What's one thing that I could get better at? I need to have more ideas in phase 3. I need to know how to open up my mind and not be feeling so constricted and get lots of ideas. I need to do that. So the next time I have a problem to solve, I'm going to remember my goal to get better. And then I'm going to work on getting better. And if I get better, I shouldn't say get, because most likely you will get better. Now you feel like you're in control of this and you can do it. And you feel this self-efficacy happening, and now it's useful, it's helpful. It's a way for you to not do away with all the frustration that's happening or the anxiety, but you have a way of working through it.
And I think, Mike, one of the important pieces of that, for anybody who's listening to us for the first time, is you as a parent working with a youngster can coach your youngster through these same phases. And we're going to go through an example in a minute, but that we've actually done this work with really young kids, elementary school age, all the way through even into college. And so it's not just a process of thinking for an adult, but in fact, we're saying it would be a great process for a youngster because they can actually follow a procedure.
Right, and so that the adult or the other person is a coach. They're not solving the problem for the child or the other person. They're helping to coach the other person to do it so they feel like the success they've had is based on their work and their commitment to it. And so they feel like they own it. It's not being done to them or for them, but it's being done with them. So this is now the second and the last graphic about the whole model we have for problem solving. We talked about the center gear here is the problem solving phases and the creative and critical thinking. It's the brainstorming and it's the analysis and it's the organization and all that. And that's important. But there are 3 other gears that are very critical to being a successful problem solver. And the gear on top is knowledge and basic skills. Reading and writing and speaking are relevant. And if there are some deficiencies in that, then that's going to interfere with the quality of your problem solving. And then the bottom two gears, the interpersonal competencies or intrapersonal competencies are important. So the inter is, well, the inter is working with a group, being kind, listening. If there's an issue with working with a group or being kind or not be or listening, that's going to interfere with your problem solving. Your intrapersonal skills, the managing time, the organization, the planning, and the persisting. That's all. Those are important too. And if you're not good at time management or you're not good at planning or organization, then that's going to really interfere with you. So we might think about these skills as some of these skills as executive functioning, and that some people that have pretty good executive functioning can integrate this pretty quickly, but others need more help in improving executive functioning. They may need the problem to solve might be, how can I manage my time better? Or the problem to solve might be, how can I be better in a group? And as an individual gets better at those inter and intrapersonal skills, it has a better command of executive functioning, then they become better and better problem solvers.
And so much of the work that Lisa and Peggy have been doing are in those realms of stress reduction and organizational skills and so on, which is why we think that having a system of that you can go to and use when you're confronted with a problem built on those other kinds of skills that you've already been talking about is such a great match. So we're excited to be a part of that work. But what we want to also do is use the cycle today and the system to look at a real problem. And one that is a common one for young people is finding a job. And especially in this post-pandemic economic situation, securing a job is really not that easy, though you would think it might be, because employers really want to know more than just a list of the information about yourself. They want to know how you think, what skills can you bring to their job, how are you going to attack the difficulties that might come to the position. You can help your youngster understand and use the process of thinking that the cycle really represents. And then he and she can then present himself as a problem solver and therefore stand out in the crowd of job seekers. So that's what we're going to try to do today is talk about that. We're going to first hope that your child could use the cycle to consider employment options, make decisions, learn about him or herself, and then gain the confidence to describe himself or herself as a problem solver. Remember that each of the slides and each of these questions reflect the phases that Mike already talked about, except now we're going to look at them sort of rewritten a little bit to represent the idea of looking for a job. So we still have that idea of the problem, the research. Here's where we're generating lots of ideas. We're picking a job to go after, and so on. We can go back and forth as many times as we need. Maybe we need more research. That's really all okay. And so what this represents are some questions that you might ask your youngster, or your youngster, if they're able, might find out themselves that they're asking themselves in order to go through the process of finding a job. So take a look at this list. You'll see that they represent the phases, questions about phase one, questions about the research. Here's where the youngster is trying to find out, what do they know about themselves? What are their skills? What ideas of our jobs are there? A whole list. That's that brainstorming list that Mike was talking about. And then the other phases. Again, questions that a youngster could ask themselves, or you could help by asking them. We're trying to present these questions so that anyone trying to address a transition, in this case, the transition of looking for a job, can do so in a systematic, mindful, calm way, trying to break through that kind of chaotic feeling of, oh my gosh, how am I going to get a job? Depending on the skill and the confidence, a youngster could do this themselves, or you, of course, as a parent, could help them. They always follow those 6 phases, and going back again and looking at the phases over and over again is okay. In fact, that's a sign of gaining the skill of independent problem solving. So visualize yourself helping your youngster answer these questions if you were helping them look for a job this summer. They would start with the initial questions about what kind of jobs do I want, what kinds of skills do I have, what are some ideas that I have, and eventually, how am I actually going to do this? I'm going to pick 1 or 2, and now I'm actually going to do it. So with a little luck, your youngsters got some ideas of jobs. Now, how can your child look more than just everybody else as they look for their first, perhaps their first job? I remember when I was looking for a job when I was in high school, and I wanted to be a waitress, and probably it was early college, not even high school. And I couldn't get the job because I didn't have any experience. I couldn't get any experience because I couldn't get the job. So I was stuck and being, and that's such a common problem. I think what we're saying here now is something that I didn't know then. I needed to be able to show myself as something more than just the list of experiences I've had, because frankly, I had none as far as waitressing was concerned. I needed to be able to present myself as somebody who could solve problems and answer the important questions.
So there's a big emphasis on your transcript, and then there's a big emphasis on a resume if you're going to apply for a job. But the transcript and the resume just says what you did. It doesn't really talk about how you think or how you behave or what your attitudes are. So you're way more than your resume. You're way more than your transcript. So it's your responsibility to let that employer know that. And they're not going to know it unless you can tell them some stories about how you solved a problem. What was the situation that happened? How did I define that problem, and who cared about the solution? How did I think about who cared about the solution and who I needed to convince? So how did I do research, and what did I find out? And how many ideas did I come up with? And how am I able to expand and really look broadly at possible ideas? And then how did I pick the one I picked? How did I do that? And what criteria did I use? And what risks was I willing to take? And then how did I actually decide on how to carry out that idea and actually do it? And when I was done, I wasn't done yet, because I needed to also say, how did I do? Okay, I have to take the responsibility to say what worked for me, what did I like, what seems to be my strength, what's still kind of getting in my way, what is something I could be better at. I want to really get better at that. In fact, let me tell you a little short story about how I got better at that. And so that employer knows that you're a problem solver that can solve problems just whatever happens. And that's a really that's a unique skill. A person that can present themselves as a problem solver is so unique when they apply for a job. Maybe a couple out of 100 will do that. The other people will lay their resume, or say the 9 things they did verbally, and they don't talk about thinking.
And maybe your youngster hasn't even had a job yet. And,
Right.
So you're thinking, oh my goodness, like what are they going to do? What we're trying to help you see is that you might be able to help your youngster discover some things about themselves in the things that they do. Work they've done at home, volunteer work, help their dad do something. And that could be described in this process rather than just as a list of I did something. We're trying to help a youngster be able to see that they did something in a thoughtful way, and then have the skills to explain that to somebody else.
So we have some slides here, some ideas, some maybe as your child looked at some pictures that showed kids doing things, they'd go, oh, well, I did something like that. Oh, I could tell that story. Yeah, I was a tutor I could tell my story that way. I helped somebody that was really challenged, and I was able to really, and I'm got some computer skills, and I helped some people do that. Let me tell you my story about how I was able to accomplish that. And in telling your story, without telling somebody, I'm really persistent, you tell the story that tells the story about how you continue to try and you found another way of doing it, and you finally accomplished it. And so you don't need to tell someone I was persistent. You can tell a story that shows that you were persistent, or that you were caring, or that you were, you were careful. I pay attention to details. I'm a perfectionist. I can tell you about my painting jobs that show that. I don't need to tell you that I'm a perfectionist. I can tell you the story about what painting job I did around the house or for a neighbor, and that tells the employer a lot about you. You may never yet have had a painting job as a painter, but you still can tell stories that way.
And your stories about that you're helping your youngster identify, even if they've never done any of these jobs, maybe there's something about looking at pictures. You could just do this in pictures in a magazine, anywhere, working with the youngster. What are the skills that these people have that let them get to these jobs? And does your youngster have any of them? And that might be something that they could showcase, because one of the value added of thinking through a process this way is for your youngster to start to be able to identify their own skills and feel good about themselves and gain some confidence and self-efficacy about the things that they can in fact do. So we're back to those 6 phases again. You see that we keep repeating ourselves, but now here our youngster has actually been trying to has made a decision about one of the jobs they want to try to get, and they've made some actual answers to those questions that we posed earlier. They know what they're trying to achieve. They did some research about themselves. They found out that they're not good at getting up in the morning and they don't drive. That's going to have some big impact on what kind of job they could apply for. They also spent some time brainstorming a bunch of ideas of things that they might want to do. Again, following those 6 phases. And finally, they picked one. They said, you know what? I don't have to drive. I'm going to paint houses. I know there's a neighbor who does this kind of work right in my neighborhood. So now this is phase 5. Here, if you take a look at some of the answers that the youngster has written down, the person has, in fact, made a decision. They're going to try to get the job with the neighbor. And once they've had a chance to talk to the neighbor about this painting job, they're going to spend a little bit of time reflecting on what they knew, how did they do, what else would they want to do if they do get the job or they don't get the job, what would they learn about the process.
Yeah,
following, go ahead, Mike.
Let me just interject a little bit in phase 5. When they're planning having an interview, what they plan to do is, I'm going to tell the story of how I painted my little sister's room with her help, and this was not an easy thing. She was not so happy about it. But let me tell you how we solved the problem together, and what we did and how we decided together, my little sister and I, how we would paint it and what colors and how she could help. And then we did it and the results were great. And she's a happy person now. And what I really learned about myself is I have to listen. When I'm going to do something with somebody, I've got to listen to them, what they want to do. I can't just think my own paint, I'm just going to paint it, I'm not going to pay attention. I did that. So I saw how important it is when you're painting something in someone's house, that you listen to what they want and respect that and talk with them and be collaborative with them. And that was really great learning for me. So the story continues. The young man that was applying for the job, he thought to himself, so what roadblocks did I encounter and how do I get around them? Always there are roadblocks. Whenever you're trying to do things, some things just don't happen. Unexpected happens. Something gets in your way. So what do? Do you give up, or do you, and stop it and get frustrated? Or do you go, I'm going to work around that, or I'm going to find another way of doing it, but you're going to do it. It didn't work. My plan didn't work. My first idea about what I was going to do in my little sister's room, that wasn't going to work because she was really angry about it. So how can I find it? How can I go about finding a better solution? What did I learn about myself by how organized I am and how I get the job done on time? And what did I learn about working with other people? My sister was really important in this. And she wasn't just a bystander. She was a critical part of the whole process. What did I learn about working with people? And how did I set a goal to improve? How did I think about myself and pat myself on the back for what I did well, but take responsibility for, I've got to talk to who I'm going to work with from the beginning, not wait until they're, until they get angry or upset or something. I need to do that. So I've got to remember to communicate, right away with the people that I'm working with.
And you notice that this reflection, these questions focus on what could go wrong as well as what could go right. And one of the things I think you probably experienced in your own life, I know I did in school, is that kids have a really hard time when things don't go right. And it's important that they understand that in almost everything, especially in a transition, there's going to be frustrations. And that is what happened to this young man.
So, I didn't get the job. Oh boy, I'm so disappointed. So what do? Do I just be disappointed and angry and frustrated and quit, or not? Maybe not. Maybe I have another approach. So maybe I talk to my neighbor and say, so what do I need to do to be more successful in interviews? What worked and what maybe, could I have done better? So my neighbor told me that actually when he said why he decided not to give me the job is that his business travels around a lot, and they're traveling a lot, and that kind of amount of traveling really might not be the best thing for me now. So he wasn't comfortable with that. So, okay, thank you for listening and interviewing, talking with me and being straight with me. So what do? Back to the problem. So I'm gonna search for a job so I can earn some money because I still want to buy that computer. So what ideas for jobs do I have? I got to go back to my list of ideas, and I also need to get better at interviewing. I need to get better at telling my own story and interviewing. So
failure is kind of like the bad word you're not allowed to say, but we think there's a lot to learn in failure, and by helping your youngster actually reflect on what happened, there's a learning in the failure, but the process gives them the steps to go back to in order to say, okay, wait, I have a whole list of other jobs. Remember way back in phase 3, I had 5 or 6 or 7 jobs that might work for me. Maybe I should look at one of those. So failure is not always.
So the phases of the roadmap is the cycle of problem solving. The structure of the cycle of problem solving is your friend. Go back to your friend. Your friend will show you how to stop, how to think, how to move forward, and be in control of things. So remember, think of the problem solving cycle of problem solving as your friend. So and learn how to be better at telling your story as a problem solver. You can use those 6 phases as an outline for your story. And if you're painting your sister's room, what's the problem? What research I need to do? What are some ideas that we have? How did we pick them? How did I learn to communicate and work with my sister and maybe have her doing part of this? I need to do that. So then I need to be able to be better at describing it briefly in a letter of application, or describing it briefly in a conversation with an employer, and be prepared for questions that that employer might ask me as he kind of probed, well, tell me more about how you work with your sister. What is it that she was doing, and how was that getting in the way, and what you do? And then how did you possibly get your little sister to be part of the painting crew, that got this job done? So you got to learn to do that. And if you can master that and communicate it as a storytelling and not just a list, you have a big advantage over probably almost anybody else that would be applying for the jobs.
And I think it's important regardless of the kind of job your youngster might want to do, or a project they might want to work on. We're just using a job transition as an example. But if you can help your youngster record their answers to some of those questions, maybe on Post-its, maybe with a tape recording, maybe on the list, as Mike said, so they actually come up with an outline, depending on their skill set, they might then be able to actually write their story, or at least tell their story in a different way, rather than just say, I'd like to have a job, and I'm a nice person, but rather, I like to have a job because here's how I came to you. I did all this research before I even came to you. I learned about myself before I even came to you. And part again of value added is for your youngster to come away with some self-knowledge and feeling good about something they've already done at home, something they've done with their family that is actually a great accomplishment, and might be a way to move into a different realm, in this case, getting a job. The youngster's trying to explain the thinking he or she used to get the job.
Well, let me ask you this as you're going through this. I mean, there's so many tie-ins to what we've been talking about for 3+ years now. I mean, I loved what you said, and I'm going to ask Peggy and Lisa to reflect on this too as you're continuing the presentation. I love what you said about the fact, those little slogans: difficult roads often lead to beautiful destinations. Mindfulness, practice, problem solving. I love that term that you've now, have created, because it is. It's a mindfulness approach. You've done a wonderful job of blending together your problem solving approach to the mindfulness stuff. A couple of questions, couple of thoughts came up, reactions. So I saw the gears. And I see that the problem solving is a process that is out here. It's cognitive, but it's out here. It has an outcome. And then I saw those two other gears underneath that top gear, intra and interpersonal. They can be supportive or they can sabotage the process. Is there any thinking in your model as you continue to evolve it and develop it about you're teaching a stage of how to go about solving a problem? When you were going through that cycles of problem solving, Mike, and I'm not kidding you about this. I mean, I was excited about it. I mean, it makes sense. It really does. I'm not just saying that because the two of you are here. It really makes sense of solving a problem, looking at the stages. The thought that came to mind is, how much practice does it take that it becomes a reaction rather than something that you got to think about? But the main question, before I turn it over to Peggy and Lisa for a minute, is there any discussion or any thinking within the dialogue the two of you have about how to help people enhance the intra or intrapersonal skill set that they have using your model?
Yeah, it's the same model. In fact, one of the examples that we have in the book that we're getting ready to publish is about how do you discover something about yourself. The problem to solve is that you are a bad listener. The problem to solve is you have anger management problems. The problem to solve is you're not a good team player. And you can go through that same process of the 6 phases of thinking to solve a problem about yourself. You are the audience, you have the problem, but the thinking is the same. What do I know about myself? What are some of the things I can do to improve the situation? Who do I have to go to get help? Maybe, that's a big step for some people. How am I going to know whether it worked or not? Do I have any criteria? So I think, and for me, what makes this model user friendly? Is it basically could be applied to anything? You could apply it to what am I going to do when my tire blows out on the Southern State Parkway on Long Island. I mean, you know, before I just start crying, wait, let me take a breath, let me think, let me calm myself down. And now give me some tools to solve my problem. And at some point you would hope that it becomes second nature.
So we have the graphic, and the graphic again is a physical model that is your friend. And you can think about your thinking by looking at the graphic. And you can say, you know, wow, something happened. And what did I do? I just jumped to solution. I didn't think about it. I said, oh God, this happens. I'm going to do this. And I tried it, didn't work. I didn't stop and actually define the problem. And I didn't think about research. So when we use these graphics, they have some language connected to them. And so besides being a physical representation of what we're saying, there's also words with them. And if you look at the bottom gears, we write, and you can, we've done a kind of a minimal list of interpersonal skills, but you can see, being a good member of a team, listening, I get my job done on time and all that. So when you are reflecting in phase 6, you should look at the model, and you can look and say, I'm actually pretty good at being kind in a conversation and helping people, say things, but I still don't get my work done on time, and when I come to it, I just don't get it done on time. I got to get better at that, and so you pick a particular problem-solving skill like research, or a particular interpersonal skill like or intrapersonal skill, and you pick that as something to improve, and then you can learn to do it. And there's coaching. We have a lot of materials that help people know how to coach you if you need to be one of those things. But it's the same model. We have a friend who's a lawyer in New York City, and she has the model on her wall. And when she works with clients, or when they have partner meetings, all the time she'll say, "Stop, guys, stop. Look at the model. We just skipped down to solving the problem. We don't even agree what the problem is."
So let me ask you this, Peggy and Lisa, you two have different different voices from different perspectives, but they've always merged together. So if you, as you listen to this and comment on this, is there a way that you could provide a quick reaction to that from your voice? Peg, if you would go first, from the school psychologist behavioral perspective.
So I was thinking of a couple of things actually as you guys were speaking, and one of the things that we talked about with respect to transitions is that they can be very overwhelming, and so people get stuck, or as you said before, you get anxious, you get depressed, and you just get stuck. So the thoughts of your process there is that you come up with many different solutions and try different things and then reevaluate, because I think people say, well, I tried one thing and it didn't work, and then they're done. But I think when you have a number of possible solutions to a problem, then you look to see if that one worked or it didn't work, and then you go reevaluate. And if it did, it's good. And if it didn't, then you try another kind of solution. So I think that is a really important thing. Last week, Lisa Carrera talked about her son who has an IEP, but he's going to go off to college. And one of the things that she talked about is for him to know himself and to know kind of what his disability means for his future in college and his future learning strategies. And so it really is a model that he probably could use very nicely when he's describing himself, understanding himself, knowing what he needs to accomplish in order to accomplish his college goals. And she's done that. She's a special education teacher, but I think that this program, the one that you've developed, tied very nicely with what she was talking about for her son who is transitioning into a college situation with a disability. Also, for people who are more challenged, I think with parental guidance, they can have their parents sort of walk them through and help them through the process of reevaluating the steps and looking to see which worked, which didn't work, and then kind of knowing a little bit more about themselves and their needs. So I think from all different levels of functioning, if you will, the model works very nicely.
I think truthfully that the one of the things over the years, and also listening to some of the exchanges that you have been doing over the last 2 years, a child with a disability, I think, would find this to be even more powerful than perhaps my regular old high school kid who says, "Oh, really? I mean, come on, I don't want to," you know, they always just want to get it done. But a child who needs some structure to kind of help think through something, and a system that a parent could actually do, you know, could actually ask the questions and record the kids' answers, or help the kids see themselves in a different way. You know, they don't have, the parent doesn't have to be a teacher, doesn't have to be a special ed teacher. They actually can help their, you know, we used the example when we did the program with you last year of a babysitter, you know, helping 2 kids that were fighting over who's going to get to use the blocks, and saying, wait, let's think through what we're going to do here. And letting a youngster know that having lots of ideas and some don't work, and then you go back and you start again, is okay. Is, you know, I think you probably see that kids' resilience is nowadays not that great, you know, that they do once and done. And if it's wrong, okay, that's the way it is. I did it, you know.
Right.
So let me ask this from Lisa's perspective. Let me ask you, Lisa, okay, coming in, you know, the interesting thing, and I'd like to ask both you and Peg this, but I want Lisa to get your perspective in first. You know, we were running around pre-COVID talking about how we were going to knock on the school district doors to try to introduce mindfulness as a technique before the IEP process. I really could see, beyond the breathing in and breathing out and relaxing, to be able to institutionalize this model in the problem solving of the IEP process, I think would provide direction, and it would provide purpose, and it would take out a lot of the noise of, you know, the contrast and conflict. And Lisa, I'd like to know what you think about that.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent idea, Larry. And you know, part of, like, I was making notes when Pat and Mike were speaking, but some things they said, I mean, I love the way they create concrete ideas. I really love their concrete examples because it gives you a visual. It's very helpful to understand. And when they talked about failing, there's an expression I love, which is called failing forward. Because just because you're failing it, you may be, you know, you're moving on to the next step. You know, you think of it as failing forward. And the other thing they mentioned about with, I think it's very important when you're doing this model that they have to be very aware of negative self-talk. And I think that could be really very, very impactful before an IEP meeting. You know, when we're going into the meeting, we may be already like creating a defense. You know, going into the meeting, oh, what's going to happen? I'm here and I'm going to walk in like ready to fight. So being very aware of your negative self-talk, I think this using the roadmap could be very useful for that. And I want to tie that in with the idea of using the roadmap for mindfulness itself. You know, when you're sitting down to first, you know, thinking about, you know, you want to relax, you want to breathe, you know, try to get into like some kind of like a calm mode. If you can be aware of what's going on in your mind, thinking all the talk is like, okay, I'm sitting here and like my mind is like blowing up with stuff. Okay, but that's the problem. Like, so how do I solve the problem? And you can do it, I think, like a roadmap for mindfulness itself.
I've always thought, Lisa, from listening to you before, that there are lots of strategies, and having lots of strategies sometimes itself is a problem. You don't know what strategy to use. You got so many things. So having an approach to even say, okay, this is what I need to do. I know 10 strategies. How do I pick the one that I want to try today? You know, it would seem to me that it could be helpful.
Would it be, I'm thinking of, as we're talking, I'm just thinking of a student-directed conference where the student there's a problem that's happened, a situation or issue, all that. And the student is talking about how he and she went through the mindful use of the problem solving strategy and worked and had to, didn't work and all that. So there's a student that's actually telling the story about how he and she is thinking and behaving, rather than someone sitting in a conference and having everybody else talk around them or at them or about them. And the other thing that we do is that people don't go from non-problem solvers to independent expert problem solvers like click. So we visualize a set of stages. And in the beginning, the coach has a lot of structure and control of it. And so there's a framework to do that. And the student is learning to do that. And then the next phase is now the coach gives more of the responsibility of the thinking in the problem solving process there. And then in the next step, where the coach now becomes, the student is more in control of it. The student is the one that defines the problem, researches it, has ideas, talks about what didn't work and how they went back, and the coach is now giving a lot of emotional support, but is not structuring it, because you want the person to be able to do this more on their own without waiting for someone to be there, to be their coach or be their counselor or something like that. So that we outline that whole process.
Good. Lisa?
Makes sense. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's owning your own way of thinking, really, being able to own how you think and to grow from it, and eventually it leads you to that point when you talked about, second nature, being able to respond rather than react. You're really getting to that point where you learn how to, by going through those phases, you're learning how to respond.
All right, so let me ask you this, all right? And I'm sensitive to time as well. So if you can keep your response direct to this particular question. And then I want Patricia to go back with Mike to finish the presentation. And then I want you, Lisa, to give an example that people can use, like the meditative example. Because I'm not sure if everyone knows this, but this will be our last presentation of this particular academic year, and then we will pick up, I think it's August the 26th, Thursday. But in the meantime, there's always the Peggy and Lisa corner, okay, with icon and ability to contact Peggy and Lisa over the course of the summer. But here's a direct question.
Yes.
Mike and Patricia have moved away from the school district, but they have thousands of connections. You two have Peggy has moved away from the school district, but still continues with, again, thousands of connections. And you, Lisa, as a parent, still advocating with thousands of connections. If we think this model is what it is, and we know that it is, and we've all have, consumed it, and we're thinking about different ways of practicing it in our own life, how could we, what recommendation, Peggy, from you as a school psychologist, and Lisa, you as the parent, connected with all these parent network groups, how could we knock on the door of a school district or Department of Education and say, hey, look, try this, build this into the process? Because of the fact that I think it would be a real value add, besides the breathing in, breathing out, exhaling, getting yourself under control, being collective, the whole bit. But they have a model. They have something that can be utilized, that school districts could be practicing. We've all heard the nightmare stories of people walking out of an IEP meeting, both from the administrative side, the parent side, the advocate side, the parent advocate side, and they have something that I really think, what Peggy and Lisa, what do you think that's possible, or what would you recommend, knowing what you know?
I mean, knowing Peggy's experience with working in the school district, I think that's very accessible, because, Peggy has this school experience and I have kind of this meditation experience. And I think writing some clear problems with how this can help in a situation would be, I think it's an excellent idea. I love the model.
I think you have to be careful in a school system too. I mean, you have to be fair to even the model. You have to say, what's the problem you're trying to solve? And you know, if the problem you're trying to solve is how to make an IEP meeting, once you identify what that is, an IEP meeting a less stressful situation, how could you present a model that might do that, incorporating the things that Lisa and Peggy have been talking about, as well as a actual physical model. And you know, it's more than you knock on a schoolhouse door and somebody says, oh yes, fine, we'll do this.
No,
Because
but let's take that. Let's build upon that. So they've come together. They have a presentation. They have a signature. They've been doing this. Can what they've been doing be embedded into your model that school districts, not that you're just going to go in and hand something in, but through in-service training and stuff like that? Do you think your model would be the vehicle where they could build in their content and what the things they've been doing about mindfulness?
Can I just want to, I got an idea. What if you had specific problems? You can start with like a few, like what if you have an angry parent per se? You know, what if you have a family that continually does not show up to the meetings and it's very difficult to get services for the child? You know, what if you have parents who have language problems, you know, with the meeting? You can set up certain problems and then work through solutions to present. And Peggy knows all of these because she's been there, done that. I mean, all of you do. Pat and Mike, you know this as well.
and you can do that. I mean, and we could do that. We could, you know, come up with some approaches that we might be able to show to a school. You know, I think what Mike and I have experienced is it takes buy-in beyond the just people just coming in and saying, oh, here's a new, you know, I went to a workshop and here's a new plan.
Right,
And,
right.
I think the kind of work that you're doing now, Larry, in terms of outreach is much more grassroots. And if more people hear that, and the four of us think also about other ways to present this model with that purpose in mind, people might say, hey, this is a good thing. Let me use this in my family. Let me use this with my kid. Oh, and by the way, when I go to the IEP meeting, I'm going to say to the psychologist, you know, here's what we did at home when we were approached with a problem with our youngster. And you might get some, you know, buy-in. It's a process, and you're asking people to change how they do things, and that's hard.
And let me ask you something very directly for you and Mike. Is there a way to incentivize the incorporation of this type of thing? I mean, the fact is, if in a school district, is there a way you as administrators could say to your team there, I want you, is there a way to incentivize it so this way it's not a top-down, you know, do it because I think you should do it? I mean, could you work it out with the you know, the in-service training, you know, wrap them around continuing ed credits that people would get something, where the people would get something out of this from using it, from where the both of you sit? Have you?
Well, I think, yes, in terms of helping teachers understand it and psychologists understand it, and you know, in service programs, and absolutely that would be useful. Mike has been making some connections with Rotary, and having you know, Rotary use it as a model for doing their own work, as well as a model for doing the work that they do with children. I mean, I think that you know, school districts, you know, we did this in a school district, and it took a lot of time and effort to convince people that this is a better way to help kids understand more than just the content, and understand the thinking behind the content.
Well, it seems that what jumps out at me is the thing we all want is we want kids to be successful and feel good about themselves. That's what we want to do. And so that's our goal. And so we've got, good educators that are figuring out how can I do that? How can I help a student feel in control and successful and good about themselves and have some self-efficacy that I just say if I work hard, I can get it done. So what we're doing is not necessarily a new thing. We're adding value to what people are already doing, so that if you're the school psychologist or the counselor, and would it be, if kids learn to do this, would they be more capable of communicating with you and having more control over their own lives? Would, if you as a school counselor or a social worker or a school psychologist actually use it, and when we mean use it, we mean it's on the wall, you point your finger at it. It's an overt use of the model, and it's an overt use of the language of the model, so that the kid is doing it and you're doing it and the parents are doing it. And wouldn't it be interesting if all those players in this saw themselves as problem solvers together doing it? And so the value here is, why would you do it? You're doing it because it's going to help you accomplish your goal of helping that kid be better and be more confident and safer.
Well, look, you can see where this is going. We could talk for hours with this, but before we do wrap this up, because I want Lisa to be able to do that exercise, and also if there's any questions from people that are here. Patricia, I know that you were working through the slide presentation and you got to the one about, rushing to judgment or something like that. Do you want to spend a few minutes just wrapping that part of it up?
Yeah, we could wrap it up, and I think it's important because, again, our audience tonight is our parents, and who we're hoping could see this model as a way to help their youngsters through the transitions that are going to come in their life. Because we're using the example of a transition of looking for a job, but it could be any transition. It's a way to kind of think the process and control the process rather than have the process control you. And Mike, I don't know if you want to say just a few words about the example of our friend the painter.
Yeah. So the story continues to the kind of the end part of the story. So the story that wanted a painter. Well, this boy went back to his neighbor, the painter, with another idea. The boy said, "Look, I love to paint. I'm going to start a little business right here in my neighborhood. I'm going to go find painting jobs in my neighborhood, within a few blocks, and I'm going to learn that way. And, if I have questions about that, would you help me?" And the guy said, "Oh, of course I will." I mean, he was impressed with the boy's initiative to do that. And he says, "I know the person that runs the design, the interior design store down in the mall, and he would really be, or she would really be happy to give you some advice and things like that. In fact, I have some tools. I'll stake you to some tools, some brushes and some tarps and stuff like that, and go for it." And so the boy took it. He stuck with his idea of painting, but he found another way of actually using those skills to do something that was more possible for him.
And I think what the point is, he's back in that cycle again. And especially for a youngster who's struggling, having something they can go back to, I think, makes it possible to, ultimately be successful. I think that most of the times we're running to the solutions. And I think that's one of the things that we are trying to advocate. You've been advocating for the last 2 years, that there is a more mindful, productive process to take a breath rather than just run to the solution. And if we can show that to kids, that here's a way to do it, especially kids who maybe don't feel that great about themselves, don't think they have a great skill set. The process gives them a way to say, no, you do. Let's think about what you like, what you don't like, and how might that show up in a job, and how could you talk about that in a way that would show you that you've got skills that might help you, find a job. Sometimes the jump feels like a long jump and almost impossible to make in a transition. But I think that the practice and tools and resources that Lisa and Peggy have been giving help make that gap not quite as big. And we're hoping that you could add the cycle of problem solving to your toolbox. So you can apply it to any transition. You can apply it to any problem.
Can I just stop you for 1 second?
Yeah.
I know you said you're hoping that we've already done that.
We have. I'm hoping that people who might listen to this or in the audience, that they see that they could add this as a mindful process, a thinking process.
And the next step within the confines of our program, the next step is the fact that, and I've talked with you and I've talked with Mike about this, is that the material that you put together, which is outstanding, and the presentation, which is outstanding, we're going to incorporate that into a guidebook like we did your last presentation, which is downloadable. Elaine and Dugan do an unbelievable job with it, and they will make it available, and then we can send it out. And we have a reach that's far and wide.
And I think that, in answer to your question of how do you get it into, more institutionalized, that's how you do it. You take the things that people have already been learning, and now you add this other layer to it, and you send it out to the different networks, and and our hope is that if somebody uses it and tries it, they'll give us feedback and say, hey, you know what? I used those breathing exercises that Lisa gave me, and I had my youngster think through a problem using that cycle, and here's what I found, and that's those kinds of testimonials that really carry weight. And
so 2 other resources that we're going to have. We're right now creating a little wallet card for your wallet, and in the wallet card is one side will be the cycle of problem solving, and the other side will be 6 simple questions. Then you can pull that out and have that, like, a little mantra, a little rub it, when you feel the anxiety, and go there. And we've written a book over the last couple of years, Thinking It Through, coaching students to be problem solvers. And that'll be out, we hope, in the middle of the summer. So,
well, outstanding job, outstanding. Before we turn this over to Lisa to move us to the conclusion of this and through the summer, are there any questions, any reactions, any observations? I know that Elaine is here and Dina is here. Anything you'd like to add, or can we move right to Lisa's magical approach?
I'd like to comment, if that's okay.
Please.
All right, thank you. First of all, the presentation was excellent. Thank you so much for doing this. I had to look up what self-efficacy was, because I didn't know what that was. And it's a nice term that shows if somebody has confidence in their own abilities to solve problems. Is that
yes,
the gist?
yes.
And I think a lot of kids of all ages, even kids that don't have necessarily disabilities, they struggle with that. That's why the big term adulting came up. And this process, having a visual that breaks down simply how to go about solving a problem, I think is really important nowadays, especially because kids they're afraid to grow up. I've come across that, my kids say that, that's what their friends say. And they're, one of my daughters has just graduated from high school, and even those kids. So I think this is valuable for a broader audience.
Yes.
But I do like the visuals. We learn in many different ways, but a visual, it puts things where you can look at them succinctly and you can draw from that. And I don't know, I found it helpful. I think it's great. So thank you for presenting.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments, Elaine, before we turn it over to Lisa?
No, I think it was terrific. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Yeah, I agree. It was definitely terrific. So Lisa.
Yes, indeed, I am here.
So
All right.
Before you do this, Peggy, Lisa, Mike, Patricia, Elaine, thank you, Dina, for participating. What a really nice job.
Thank you.
Really nice job. Lisa?
All right. All right. Hi, everybody. Well, I want to, great thanks for Mike and Patricia for this presentation, because it's really excellent, and you guys have your heart and soul in it, and it's, I think it could be a phenomenal help. So thank you for that. All right. So as we're here, what I want to do right now is to bring us from our minds and come into our bodies to settle us down and relax. And this is a good skill for any situation, even before problem solving. So we're going to start by just taking a nice deep breath in through our nose and letting it out like you're blowing out a straw as you exhale. One more time, breathe in and exhale. And as we exhale, we can even bring a process of relaxation. We can start to letting our face relax, our eyes, our jaw, our shoulders. We want to come in contact with our chair where we're sitting, with our feet on the floor. We want to ground ourselves. And then just breathe. Not trying to control the breath, just letting it be. And knowing that mindfulness itself and meditation is a problem solver in itself. Our minds are absolutely beautiful things. And meditation can help you use your mind more effectively. And one of the first steps is to be aware. Not to judge, but just to be aware. So as you sit and just breathe, to be aware of your thoughts. What am I thinking? Am I involved in the past? Is my mind involved in the future? But when I bring my mind into my body, because the body can only be in the present moment, we want to bring ourselves back into the present moment. And we do that just by connecting with our breath. So one more time, let's just take a nice deep breath in. Nice exhale. Just connecting to our bodies. So if we know we're stressed, if we're having a stressful moment, just by connecting into your bodies, you're becoming in the present moment, and that's where your stillness lies. And that will be where your greatest ability to think and to problem solve will be. Again, thank you, Patricia and Mike, for this great work. And everybody have a wonderful, wonderful summer. Thank you.
Wonderful summer. Thank you all. Thank you all. Outstanding job.
Yeah.